All right, so welcome everyone to tonight's webinar presentation. Super excited for our special presentation for tonight. I'm not going to take up any time because we have some very special guest speakers for this evening. So just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Shantae Moore. I'm a certified financial educator with the Heartland Institute of Financial Education. And I want to welcome you to Oak Brook Financial Center's this is our monthly education series. April is Financial Literacy Awareness Month. So we as an organization, every single month, we try to share free financial education workshops with individuals that we know, especially during this time. This is actually Money Smart Week, this particular week. So our office is happy to host this event to talk about how money works for kids and parents, which is a super important topic, whether you're a parent or not. If you're a guardian or a relative, we have a lot of good information to share tonight. I would just quickly say that if you're interested in hosting any type of workshop, like a financial literacy workshop like the one that you're going to watch tonight, make sure you get back to the person who invited you. They'll be happy to have a conversation with you about how, if not themselves, one of our guest speakers can come and have these exact same conversations, different topics. We specialize in all areas of personal finance. So again, we're going to go ahead and just get started with our session tonight. I'm going to introduce our very first speaker. This man is probably one of the best educators that I've actually had the pleasure of working with, Mr. Patrick Callahan. While he's pulling up the slides, Patrick has actually been in the financial services industry. This is his 25th year. So truly an expert, has probably one of the most esteemed, efficient financial planning practices that I've actually witnessed. I've learned a lot from Mr. Callahan over the last 10 years that I've been with our organization. A great family man and one of our go-to experts about this topic. So Pat, I'm going to turn it over to you. We can see your slides and go ahead and take it away.
Wow, thanks, Shantae. Welcome everyone to our talk tonight. Thanks for that wonderful introduction, Shantae. Hopefully I sound like I know what I'm talking about after that intro. But so tonight you're in for a treat. Really, I'm going to cover some things, but really who I want to hear from is our next presenter, who's going to be talking about college planning. That's going to come up here in about 20 minutes. But I just wanted to cover a few things with you this evening. So I'm probably not going to go in depth on a lot of these things I'm going to show you on the screen tonight. But my suggestion is, if you see something that pops up and it's like, oh, I need to learn a little bit more about that, or I'm a little bit confused or whatever, I would just recommend just getting in touch with the person you invited down. They can, reach out to one of the other certified financial educators and get any questions answered for you. No pressure, really just an extension of this class tonight. Just to make sure that you're aware and you understand, for whatever it is you need for your own plan. But tonight we're going to talk a little bit about how money works for kids and parents. And as Shantae had said, this talk tonight is presented by Heartland Institute of Financial Education, which is a national 501c3 organization. I've been affiliated with them, oh boy, I think for like 7-8 years now, at least, as a certified financial educator. And what we do with the Institute is we work with organizations, corporations, churches, really where a group of people come together for whatever, and we provide financial education. Major reason why corporations bring us in to teach is to really provide a nice soft benefit for their employees. As maybe some of you have worked for a corporation where you've had a 401k, and a lot of times you just don't necessarily get the education that you need, not just on the 401k, but related matters. So those institutions or those corporations will bring us in and provide financial education, not just on the current benefits that they provide, but also on related matters. So tonight, I'm going to just hit on some items that I like to teach in our class. But again, the intention tonight is just pure education. Our intent is not to provide any solutions or promote any products or any companies or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. A little disclaimers, just for compliance reasons. As I just mentioned, everything is for education only or designed for education. Nothing in this presentation is construed as investment, tax, legal, or accounting advice. We do not guarantee any sort of rate of return, or any examples provided are hypothetical illustrations for purposes only, and information contained in this presentation is not only accurate due to the constant change in securities, insurance, and tax laws. And you're definitely not going to learn everything tonight on all this. And some of you may come here tonight with being pretty well versed in all these areas. That's great. If I don't teach you something, definitely the next person will. So let's get started here with this HowMoneyWorks book. If you have not seen this book or have gotten a copy of this, I highly recommend that the person that invited you to this get you a copy. This is probably one of the most popular financial books since COVID, and it's been showcased on all the major news channels. The one thing I love about this book more than anything is it's the simplicity of the book. I've had my 10-year-old son read this book, and I've had an avid investor who's been investing for 30 years read this book and got something out of it. It's designed to be simple. It's designed to be written in a story form so you can learn. But the major thing in here is we teach on is really the 7 money milestones. And so I just wanted to say, if you don't have a copy of this, just ask for one. And if you need another one, maybe for your child or your adult child, we'll get you one as well. I think this is a funny picture. I don't know if I agree with this because I have a boat, and some days I feel like it is more expensive than children. But some of you have heard this before, that raising a child from birth to 18 will cost you over $250,000. Now, if they told you that, before having the child, maybe you think twice about it. But it's quite expensive. And so I don't put a price tag on it, because the joy I get from having my 2 children is, it's there's no price you can put on that. So, but there's proper planning that needs to come into play when you have children. And the sooner you start on some of this stuff, the easier it is. The problem is that tomorrow never comes for most of us. There's always something else to spend our money on. Today is tax day. And so I had to go to the post office, and everyone in line had a letter addressed to the IRS so they could certify it. And there's just always seems like there's money going out for everything, but there's a lot of discipline that needs to come in place when it comes to planning like this. And so I'm going to just hit on that, but I just wanted to show you this, that I thought this was kind of funny, that we should remember that it's not cheap to have children and raise children. Tonight's talk, though, is, it's a little bit of, for our kids, but it's also for ourselves as well. And so these are just some general questions that I think of when it comes to, planning and investing and saving for our future. But we always have to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of the savings? What are we trying to accomplish with our savings? For whatever bucket is it saving for higher education? Is it saving for that summer camp that's $7,000? I just looked into a summer camp today for my son, a musical summer camp in Michigan, and it was $7,000 for the summer. I mean, that's a crazy amount of money. But there's these things that come up in our life, a dream vacation or whatever it may be. And do we have a game plan to save for that? Or do we just swipe the credit card and worry about paying for it later? Well, I don't necessarily believe in that. I know that most of us, if we have big ticket purchases coming up, we can plan for that. We can save for that rather than just swiping the credit card and worried about paying later. The other thing, though, too, is that how much time am I giving myself to save for whatever goal it may be? If it's my child and he's 1 year old, then obviously I got 17 years to go, maybe before I need to worry about paying for his education. Or if I'm thinking about retirement and I'm 30 years old, when do I want to retire? When do I want to be in a position to stop working? Or maybe I'll continue to work, but I'm working because I want to, not necessarily because I have to. So we always got to think about what's our time frame on this, and that's going to play a big role in how we invest, how much risk we take, or how little risk we take. And then how much does my budget allow for on a monthly basis? This is really, really important to continue to scrub your expenses on a monthly basis to think about, okay, what can I free up to save even more money? Or do I need to get a part-time job to maybe save some more money? Sometimes people say, well, it's never going to happen because my job doesn't do it. Well, get another job or, another part-time gig. It doesn't have to be permanent, but maybe for some time, just till you can get that, whatever you're trying to do, under control. The other thing though, too, is, and this is a blind spot for a lot of folks, is really how I'm going to be taxed on whatever I'm saving in. And we're going to hit on that in a little bit. Okay. Here's one that some people don't think about too, is can my child take control of the money later that I'm saving into? Okay. All right. So let's get into this a little bit deeper. That's great. All right. So let's get into some different options here as far as savings options with less growth potential. Checking and savings account, money market account, CDs, government series EE savings bonds. Now, savings accounts, especially high interest savings account, are pretty strong today because of where interest rates are at. I mean, if you saw the news, you saw Apple just got into the banking business and they're offering a high interest savings account at 4.15. I look at my Chase savings account and it pays 0.001. That's why I don't have a lot of dollars in that account. That's for super emergency purposes. But high interest savings accounts right now paying 4.25%. One website I would recommend looking at, not promoting the website, it's just a nice tool or nice website that kind of shows you what your options are if you're interested in looking at higher interest savings accounts, is bankrate.com. It'll show you your CD rates, your money market, your high interest savings accounts. It'll tell you what your minimum is to get, what the time frame is on it. But we need to have these in our life for obviously emergency purposes or for our safe money. Maybe we're in retirement and listen, I can't afford to have any volatility with the market. Well, maybe a high interest savings account or a 1-year CD right now may be appropriate for you. Or, you know what, I want to redo my kitchen in 2 years and I need to save some money, but I don't necessarily want to put it under my mattress or keep it in my checking account. Maybe I can get a little bit of a return on a high interest savings account. The other issue sometimes I see though, is that I'll meet with somebody and they'll have a 401k. I'll never forget it. I met with a lady a couple of years ago who had been working at University of Chicago for 10 years. And I looked at her 401k and it was all sitting in money market account for 10 years. She's like, this thing isn't growing. What's the problem? I'm like, because it's in money market. It's in cash. And I see that quite often, actually. So I bring that up just because, if you're looking at your accounts across the board, maybe do a little check-in and see, how is it allocated? Maybe it's a little bit too conservative for your time frame. But generally for our shorter time frames, these vehicles can make a lot of sense. For our emergency fund, money that we may need in case we lose our job, we don't want any exposure to the markets. This is a great option. But for long-term savings, not necessarily the best option. Okay. All right. Let's talk about a little bit about growth potential. Now, you're going to see another slide in a minute that's going to show like 401k, IRA. I want you to understand that these things that I'm showing you in front of you right now, think of this as like the engine that drives either a 401k or an IRA or a 529. You can choose these different options to grow it. Well, your IRA, your 401k, that's like the car, okay? And this is the engine. It's just, and your engine could be made of a CD. It just goes really slow because you're always driving in a school zone. Who knows? But this would be like maybe driving on the highway, potentially. So what are stocks? You hear about stocks all the time, especially when the markets were rallying. If you were on social media, it seemed like everyone was becoming a millionaire overnight, just throwing darts at meme stocks. In fact, I had a client that did become a millionaire on a meme stock. Boy, that was a fancy tax bill he got. But the reality is that stocks can be great for us and they also could be detrimental depending on what you're trying to do. But they're equity investments or ownership shares in a business. So if I like, for example, Dunkin' Donuts or I like Starbucks, well, maybe I want to own a share of those companies because I go there every day. All right. I also like using some stocks, and I like to just kind of tell my personal story for my children, right? I do have a brokerage account in place, and I like to use it simply for educational purposes for my kids, because they ask me all the time, hey, what about this company? What about that company? And we'll look at it, we'll research it. So it's sometimes it's a great tool to get your kids interested. Some of these others are maybe not as interesting to them, but just something to think about. Bonds, they represent lending your money to an entity which pays interest over a specific period of time. So if I'm a company and I'm trying to raise capital to grow my business or whatever, I may issue a bond saying, hey, you lend me money and I'll pay it back and I'll give you interest on that. So generally that can be safer depending though on the type of bond. There's something called junk bonds, and they pay a little bit of a higher interest because the company is more risky. Some of the safest bonds is treasury bonds, right? Debt in our government. So generally people will look at bonds when they are nearing retirement, or, hey, you know what? I don't want to have a lot of risk on my money. I want to just have something a little bit safer. Bonds can play a role. Now, last year, obviously, bonds went down just as much as stocks did. It was kind of an outlier year, but sometimes that can happen. Not very often, but it can. Mutual funds. This is, hey, you know, I don't want to buy the individual stock because it's too much risk. Tesla's up one day, down the next. You know, Facebook's up 70%, it's down 70%. That's a lot of risk on my portfolio. I agree. So what some folks will do is say, listen, I'd rather pool my money with other investors and buy all these different stocks, and I'll buy a share of it or a percentage of it through this mutual fund. So really what you're doing there is you're spreading your money across many different stocks, and you have someone called a portfolio manager. This is the person or people or team that manage that fund for you. So they're deciding which stocks should be in the portfolio. You're saying, listen, I'm excellent at being a nurse, or I'm a doctor. I don't know why those two came to mind, or whatever your profession is. That's what you do all day. You don't have time or the knowledge to be watching the stock market. So you may place your money here so that you have someone else that does it, and they have a vested interest in growing the portfolio. Now, if you have a 401k or a 457, you probably have some money in a mutual fund. ETFs, which have become very, very popular over the last 10 to 15 years here, which stand for exchange traded funds, are very similar to a mutual fund. The difference is you don't always have a portfolio manager. You're just buying a basket of stocks, and they can be traded during the day. So if you want to get out during the day, you can. You're going to tend to pay a little bit less because you don't have someone necessarily watching over it. They tend to mirror an index, but they become very popular because they're so inexpensive. Okay. UITs, unit investment trust. A lot of folks always say UTI or something crazy like that, but unit investment trusts are very similar to a mutual fund. And in fact, that you have, it's a pool of stocks, okay, in a fixed portfolio, and it's not necessarily traded all day long, maybe like a mutual fund or an ETF. They're generally held for 15 to 24 months. And what some people like about that is that, and you're going to see this in one of the next screens, is that you're going to get maybe a little bit more of a tax treatment as far as a long-term capital gains tax versus a short-term capital gains tax. Now, I know, Matt, that you may have heard that before, but maybe don't necessarily understand that. I don't really have the time to get into it too much tonight, but just understand, and I say that just because today's tax day, when people got their statements or filed their taxes, you know, the accountant or the taxpayer may say, hey, you owe X amount because you made money on your investments this year or last year. And you owe X because of it. Well, when you own a UIT, you tend to pay a little bit less simply because they're held for over 12 months. Okay. Annuities, they're an insurance product that allows investors to accumulate money for retirement on a tax-deferred basis. Some people use annuities to generate some sort of income stream, like a pension. So they can be used for many different reasons. They can provide nice tax treatment for cash money. Not appropriate for everyone, but they do play a role. And then others like commodities, gold, these tend to be very popular during high inflationary periods. You'll always see the commercials on TV, buy gold, buy gold, right? And you generally see that during inflationary periods. Not necessarily bad, but it's just one particular sector. And so you got to be careful not to maybe have too much allocation to something like that, just because it could be volatile. Okay. Now, breaking this down, like I said, that is those things that I just went through are like the engine, and these are these are the cars. Okay. And so we like to break this down into 3 different buckets: tax now, tax later, and tax advantage. Tax now just means you're going to pay tax that year, potentially on that account if you made money. So if you do have an high interest savings account earning 4% and you got, $100,000 in there, you're going to make $4,000. So you're going to get taxed on it that particular year for that. But it is liquid. You can touch it at any time. All right. So that's the advantage, is the liquidity standpoint. But you're going to have to pay tax on it if there's gains that particular year. All right. If you look at tax later, many are very familiar with, like I said, a 401k, you're not paying any taxes on that now. You'll pay it at the end, right? When you start to take distributions from that. And this is a blind spot for a lot of folks. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I think it is important because it can be quite eye-opening. Is that when you get to those later years and you start taking distributions on your accounts, do you understand the tax ramifications on that? I've had people come up to me after class and say, "Hey, Pat, I'm paying more in taxes than I was working. Why?" "Well, how much are you taking out of your 401k? "Oh, I'm taking X." "Oh, that's why it's treated as ordinary income. The only way to reduce that taxable income is to reduce how much you're taking on an annual basis." All right. But there's advantages along the way. You get a tax break for contributions into it. So that's important as well. Also, deferred comp plans, traditional IRAs, annuities, pensions, SEP, simple IRAs, and solo 401ks. Those are generally for business owners that are not part of a company that offer a 401k. But all of those are taxed later. And most of those, you can get a tax break the year you put money into it. All right, you get a tax break on your taxable income for that year, but you pay it later. So you don't pay the tax now, you pay it later. And then tax advantage, usually fund these with after-tax dollars, meaning I got my paycheck, Uncle Sam took his cut, everyone else, and then whatever I got left over is my net amount that goes into my bank account. And then I say, okay, from there, I want to invest some dollars into a tax advantage vehicle like a Roth IRA or cash value life insurance or a 529 plan or health savings account. This just means that later on, when you take that money out, you're not going to be taxed on it because you were taxed on the way in. So any growth on those dollars, you never have to worry about paying Uncle Sam anything on that. And then there's just a few that I want to highlight here. The investment account, like a brokerage account, invest money in the stock market, you choose the investments, or you have an advisor that helps you choose those, right? Investments, like I mentioned earlier, can be liquidated and accessed at any time. And then you would pay capital gains tax. If you pull it out in the first 12 months and there was gains, you would pay short-term capital gains tax, which is a much higher tax than if it's sold after 15 months. So greater for short-term goals can potentially grow, better than maybe a savings account if you don't need that money for a long period of time. It's easy to access and you're kind of in the driver's seat. But like anything that's invested in the market, as much as it can go up, it can go down. All right. And one of the big things, it's a reportable asset on FAFSA, which we're going to learn a little bit about more here in just a few minutes. Talking a little bit about the Roth IRA, one of the rules in my family is that if one of my nephews and nieces, when my nephews and niece turn 18, they're required by law to open a Roth IRA. All right. It's the biggest no-brainer ever if you're eligible for one. So some of the things here, some of the key points of a Roth IRA is the magic age of 59 and a half. You can't touch any of the interest that you earn on it until age 59 and a half. If you do, it could be a 10% penalty in tax on that. You can invest it in the market through an ETF, a mutual fund. You can even do a CD. All right. Your choice on what you want, how you want it to drive, how fast or how slow you want it to go. But the big thing is that those earnings that you have on there, those are all going to grow tax deferred. All right. And then you're going to be able to take those out as tax-free distributions in retirement. So that's important. Like I talked about with the 401k, you have no idea what the tax is necessarily going to be on that. At least you control your tax future with the Roth IRA, because you're not going to have to pay any tax on that. My point with this is I think it's important to have tax diversification. Have a few different buckets that you can pull from later on in life to potentially lower your tax liability. The other thing too is that tax-free distributions for higher education, as well as first-time home buyers. Okay. Now, I don't necessarily always recommend that, for education, just because it's potentially your retirement dollars. You can't borrow for retirement, but you can borrow for school. But if you get yourself in a pickle, or you just, hey, this is the best option, then you can pull from that and not get dinged with the 10% penalty or tax on that. So one of the things I like as well on the Roth IRA is that if you put money into it and you get yourself in a jam, you can touch that principal without any problem. So because Uncle Sam's already taxed that, those were dollars that were in your savings account. You put it in there, you're allowed to touch those contributions at any time. You just can't touch any of the interest until age 59 and a half. And if you do, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to get a penalty for doing so. The other big thing is that there's no RMDs. Now, some of you know what an RMD is, some of you don't. And basically what an RMD is that if you have a 401k or a traditional IRA and you've been growing it for 40 years or whatever, and you're 69 years old, 70 years old, and you're like, I still don't need this money. Well, guess what? Uncle Sam has never had his paws on any of those dollars. So now at age 73, they require you to take a percentage out every year because they want to tax you on it. And that percentage goes up a little bit every year. Well, when you have a Roth, you're not required to take out any distributions whatsoever. Okay. You also have the option to maybe convert an old 401k or an old IRA to a Roth IRA. There you generally would want to talk to a tax advisor to see if that makes sense for you. Another big thing is that's a non-reportable asset on FAFSA. Okay. Some of the concepts I already mentioned, 59.5 rule. Of course, if it's invested in the market, you always have the chance to lose. Contribution limit. So there is a contribution limit. The most you can put in per year is $6,500 if you're under age 50. And after you're over 50, you have a $1,000 catch up. And also distributions and that interest must be made after 5 years. All right. So those are some of the things that I wanted to point out on that. I love using the Roth IRA calculator. I recommend you just go to calculator.net or Google one and just run a calculator to see what it looks like. 18 years old at 8%, putting in $6,500 a year, you're looking at over $2 million in retirement, just in a Roth IRA, let alone all the other things that you may have. And that's all tax-free. So you can see why I make it a priority for anyone in my family that turns 18, they have to get one of these started. All right, moving along, 529 plans. Most of you have heard of what a 529 plan is. Okay, invest money in the market, mutual funds, maybe ETFs, tax-free growth on the money. So again, it's contributed with after-tax dollars. But as long as those dollars are used for education, there's no tax liability on it whatsoever. The other thing is that there's no income limits whatsoever. On the Roth IRA, there is an income limit. If you make over a certain dollar amount, you can't contribute to a Roth IRA. All right. So you'd have to talk to an advisor about that to see what that is and see how it applies to you. But in a 529 plan, used for education, but there is no income limits. All right. You can also put a lot of money away into them. If you live in the state of Illinois and you own an Illinois 529 plan like I do, I get a tax deduction for any contribution that I make to my 529 plan. So my kids are always getting money for birthday or whatever it may be, Christmas. Those dollars that go into the 529 plan by December 31st can be deducted on your state income tax. Okay. Parents or grandparents or say an aunt wants to own one, they maintain control of it and the child is the beneficiary of it. It could be transferred. So if one child falls out of favor, and the other one wants to step in, well, you can transfer those dollars over to the next child. Okay. The other big thing that just happened at the end of 2022 with Secure Act 2.0, they now will allow you to convert up to, I think it's $36,000 of your 529 plan to a Roth IRA. So let's say my son gets a full ride or doesn't go to school, whatever. Say I got money left over in the 529 plan and it's just sitting there. Well, like I said, you can either transfer it to another child. You could go back to school, or you could let it continue to defer until you have grandchildren. So you can ultimately let that thing grow for 30 years if you so choose, or you now have the option to convert it over to a Roth IRA up to $36,000. So that's really nice, knowing that those dollars can be converted into some sort of retirement dollars later on. And then some of the downsides of it, like I said before, potentially lose money, must be used for education. You can also now use it for high school and grade school if you so choose, and it is a reportable asset on FAFSA. Last one is cash value life insurance. Now, you have to have a need for some sort of death benefit. You have to be financially responsible for someone, maybe, right? Or someone is relying on you. For example, I have 2 children, right? Or maybe you have a parent that you take care of, and if something happened to you, you would want them to have some dollars to come in to help continue to take care of them. I'm not sure. But cash value life insurance, this is a permanent type of policy, not appropriate for everyone. But those who are looking to, 1, have an insurable need, but also 2, looking to build up some additional savings. And it has a lot of tax advantages, just like the Roth IRA. Okay. The other nice thing is that those dollars can potentially be used prior to age 59 and a half. And it is a non-reportable asset on FAFSA. Okay. So there's a lot of advantages to them. The disadvantages, though, is that, you have to apply for it. You have to be approved. You have to understand it's a long-term commitment. Okay. But for the right person, it can be an incredible tool, not just to be used for potentially education purposes, but maybe supplemental retirement. Okay. So I hit on some of these already. And some people like owning one of these on their child, right? You guarantee insurability at a young age. I bought one for my kids 15 days after they were born, simply because I wanted to lock in their insurability at a young age. Plus, I wanted a similar type of vehicle like a Roth IRA, but for my child that I could start at a young age. Okay. Now, will that money be used for education? I don't know necessarily, but I know that this is something I can hand over to them when they're, responsible enough to take over it. And that can turn into something beautiful for them. It could be maybe used for wedding expense or maybe a down payment on a home. I'm not sure, but I like all these different options, and I use all these different options because, like you can see here, some have advantages, some have disadvantages, but I like to be diversified with all of it. Okay. So when should you start saving? Well, Captain Obvious, as soon as possible. Tomorrow never comes on this stuff. What's nice is a lot of the platforms that are out there today, you can start saving with $10 a month. Okay. So there's really no excuse. It's not maybe back in the day where you needed $20,000, $30,000 to get started with savings and investing for your future. But now it's so easy. You can start as little as $10 a month. And you know what, when it comes to saving, I'm just going to leave you with this. If it doesn't hurt to save, you're probably not saving enough. If it was so easy, everyone would do it. But I know when stuff comes out of my account and I look at it and I'm like, oh, that was painful. But I know my future self will thank me, and so will my children. So with that, Shantae, I'm going to hand it back over to you. Okay. Thanks for letting me share for a few minutes tonight.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Patrick. I mean, you guys, Patrick, like I said, is an expert, and he could have talked about every single page for probably an hour and talked in more detail. So thank you so much, Patrick, for that. First of all, keep putting your questions in the chat. I do want to address April's question about, we mentioned Apple's savings account. Yes, it is actually FDIC insured. So it's interesting that they made that move and getting into the financial sector. So I want to bring up our next guest. So the book that Patrick talked about, our How Money Works book, Stop Being a Sucker. It is actually endorsed by our next presenter's organization, the national nonprofit, the Heartland Institute of Financial Education. As Patrick mentioned, Heartland is a nationwide nonprofit who goes into organizations. Their specialty is teaching financial literacy workshops at organizations and corporations, but they have a really strong college planning arm. And so I'm excited that we were able to get one of their expert college planning coaches, Miss Amy Leach, to join us. I just want to give her a proper introduction before she starts her presentation. So Amy has actually been a college planning coach for over 18 years. So a complete expert in this particular topic. She holds 2 bachelor's degrees in political science and then in the Russian and Eastern European studies with an emphasis on Ukraine. She also holds a master's degree in higher education, in particular educational leadership and policy analysis. So over the past 30 years, Amy, her work has included working with students in college, student housing, student affairs, academic advising, financial aid, student life, college planning, of course. She's also been a college educator and taught courses at college level as well. And her passion is truly helping high school students find the best college that's the best fit for them, but also making sure that they are there, that the student is going to college in a way that helps them accomplish their passion and their future career goals. So, Amy, I want to turn it over to you. I know you have some special information to share about Heartland's college planning program. So go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Shantae. Hi, everybody. My name is Amy Leach. Like she said, I have been doing college planning for an incredibly long time. What is amazing to me is I started doing college planning when my kids were really little. And now I have a son who's a freshman in high school and a daughter who's a junior. And sorry, my son's a freshman in college and my daughter is a junior in high school. So I now, like I tell all my students, not only do I do this for a living, I live this as a parent. And as we all know, our kids don't always do what we say. That's what I'm going to say about that. Now, my kids are doing really well. But I want to talk to you a little bit about the value of a college coaching program. Because over the past few years, past 20 to 30 years, the curve for the cost of college has gone like this. The cost of college this year, the biggest one I saw was an increase of 8% in tuition from last year to this year. My son's school, the students didn't get notified and their tuition went up 7%. He's at a private college. We got their new tuition bill for next year, and it is a 7% increase from his tuition from last year. So that being said, when you think about college and the cost of college, making some good financial decisions around that and making some good choices and having some advice on how to make those choices and how to do it well can make a huge difference. I live in the state of Colorado. Our higher education is one of the most expensive in the country. Our college tuition is incredibly high. A lot of kids in Colorado go out of state for that very reason, because they can pay less going to college out of state than staying in state. And that's just kind of one of the basic tips I share with our students all the time. So the other thing to think about with college is that pretty much anymore, nobody graduates in 4 years. It's a really small percentage of students who graduate in 4 years. Most students take 5.5 years. That's an extra 1.5 years of tuition and a year of lost wages. So when you look at that, it's almost $11,000, $111,000. I'm like, ouch. So if I can work with a college planner, maybe pick some classes in high school, do some community college dual enrollment work in high school, and get done with college in 4 years. There's some money to put in that I turned 18 Roth IRA plan, right? That's a lot to me. The other thing that I think students don't realize and families don't realize is there are so many different ways to fund college. There's need-based financial aid, there's merit-based financial aid, there's private scholarships and grants. My son has $10,000 in private scholarships and grants. His girlfriend, by the way, she followed my advice when I said to apply to 3 scholarships a week after you finish your college applications. She's making money going to college. She has almost $30,000 in private scholarship funding. Yeah, because what I said to her was, think about it this way, right? If you spent an hour a week and you got $1,000 scholarships, you'd be like, if you spent 10 hours doing scholarship applications and you got $1,000, you'd be making $100 an hour, right? Like, simple math, $100 an hour is better than any job I know a student can get. And she took my advice to heart. There's school specific aid. And as you move up in your career at a college, like as a freshman, you get money when you come in. Well, as a sophomore, junior, senior in college, you can apply for other funding. And then there's state aid programs. The state of California and its Cal Grant, what Patrick was talking about with assets becomes critical in California because California has a huge middle income grant. It's wonderful if you are a middle income earner. However, if you have a ton of assets and they're reportable assets, you lose out on your Cal Grant. So kind of knowing that up front, being able to do some things before your kid gets in their senior year of high school can really make a difference there. The other challenge for high school students is, right, choosing careers. I just read this yesterday. English may not be offered as a college degree anymore. As an actual, like, I got a college degree in English. It's going to be gone because you can't get a job with an English degree. You can do a lot of things with English and writing, but you can't, there is no actual English degree job other than college professor. You can't even teach high school with an English degree. You have to have a teaching degree. So knowing kind of what careers are out there, how to plan that. How do I take the things I'm interested, the things I want to do, and what degrees can I get to do that job and career? And narrowing that down ahead of time can be really, really helpful. Plus, I always like to say to my students, the worst choice you can make in college is to go from engineering to education. Do you know how many classes transfer between those 2 degrees? 0. None. Not a single course will meet from an engineering degree will meet an education requirement, and not a single course from an education degree will meet an engineering requirement. You start over. So working with kids ahead of time and kind of helping them narrow that down. I always tell them, you don't have to have an exact degree, but if we can get you in a bubble of education, we're in really good shape. And that career piece goes along with like choosing a college major. If we can get a major that we stay in that bubble and we're not bouncing around, we're going to finish in 4 years instead of 5.5. The average student changes majors 75% of students change majors at least once. The average student changes majors 3 times. Remember I said my son was a freshman? Yeah, he changed degrees already. Good news, he's a freshman. Good news, it's still in the science field. So his classes all still count. So like I said, that piece of that and working with kids around that so they have an understanding of that. I do a lot of work with encouraging kids to shadow professionals and see what that job is really like, because what a high school kid thinks the job is like and the reality of that job can really help a student narrow that down, thus narrowing down their major so that we're not doing extra work. And then my favorite thing at this time of year, it's the middle of April. Students have until May 1st is decision day. So deciding what college to apply to and what college to attend. And a big part of this, I really encourage my kids to look at their investment and their return on their investment. But the other part of that, which I really like kids to think about, is I have a lot of kids who want to go on, right? Law school, medical school, CPAs. Why would we pay $240,000 for an undergraduate education when we know we're going to get a graduate education? Right? Like that's the price at Harvard, by the way. But isn't our master's degree or our PhD from Harvard worth more than going there for an undergraduate degree? Let's go someplace undergrad where we can get it paid for. Let's choose the next tier down of school where 18% of their kids who graduate get into Harvard's medical school. Let's make that choice, right? And playing with that process and working through that process. I have a student this year, love her to death. She heeded my advice, and she could have probably gotten into a top tier school, but she applied to second tier colleges, ones that were easier to get into. She got funding from 12 colleges. She got 3 full ride scholarships. So now she's choosing between the 3 schools she got full rides at, versus getting into, say, a Harvard, Princeton, Yale, and getting minimal funding to none. So that's the kind of work we do in college planning. That's kind of work the Heartland Foundation does in college planning. So I hope that gives you a sense of kind of what we do and why we do it. College is expensive. It really, really is. And it's getting more expensive by the day. So helping students make a good choice for them that's going to give them a good return on their education investment, I think is really important. I have kids that have stayed out of college for a year. They've been in my program with me for 4 years, and they are taking a gap year because they don't know what they want to do. They don't know what they want to study. So they are doing some work, doing some different programs, taking a couple of community college classes to do some general education credits to help them narrow down that decision and make that choice. And I think sometimes that is the smartest decision for students. So what else is on here? Kind of what we focus on. 8th grade through 10th grade, we really focus on adjusting to high school, getting your course rigor down, time management, creating relationships, choosing clubs and activities that are really going to help you kind of explore careers, explore different ideas, and see what works. Picking things to do over your breaks that can be an advantage on your college application or for a scholarship. 11th and 12th grade is all about the I call it the functional work years. I'm the master of the task in junior and senior year. I have a lot of things I have a lot of students do that just, here are things you can do. And I always tell my students, if you do what I'm asking you to do now when you're a senior, your friends are going to be crazy and stressed out, and you're going to be enjoying your senior year. And it is true every time. My son's best friend was like, Mrs. Leach, should have listened to you over the summer. I am miserable right now. I'm like, I know, I told you you would be. And my son had done what I had told him to do, and he was pretty happy. The other thing, we don't guarantee any funding for college. I can't do that, but here are some of our numbers for over the last 2 years. Over $20 million in scholarships. My personal numbers this year, by the way, I have 30 seniors. I have $5 million in scholarship money for my seniors this year. This is kind of one of the first times I've run that number. I'm feeling really pretty proud of myself. And I'm really proud of my students who really did the work. We've gotten reevaluation dollars, meaning we've gone back to colleges and asked them for more funding, and they've gotten that more funding. I I've had students get anywhere from $1,000 a year to $10,000 more a year, just by asking for more money. We review college essays. Yeah, lots and lots of them. 2,000 essays. Yeah, I feel like I reviewed 2,000 essays. I didn't, but that's what it feels like sometimes. And then students accepted to summer camps and internships. The colleges on the right are a list of colleges our students have gotten into recently. We've got all of us, it was at 262. I counted mine up. I have kids into 206 different colleges. There are over 550,000 colleges. No, there are 55,000 colleges available in the United States alone. So, you know, we're not even hitting on all of them. So this year, my kids alone, UCLA, UC Berkeley, USC, Washington University, Brown, Northeastern, Northwestern, Chicago Institute of Art, NYU, Duke, University of North Carolina, Michigan School of Business, which this year is touting a 3% acceptance rate. So I'm super proud of my student that in there. So that's what we are. We work with kids, really helping them narrow down what they're doing, how they're doing it in a way that ultimately, my ultimate goal is to save you and them money. And then we don't need this, so I'm gonna. But the other thing I can say about the college planning program is that there's an all-encompassing program, which is a year-long program. Students sign up for a year. We do coaching every month, and they get 4 phone calls a year. But I also have a career assessment program where students can sign up and just do a career assessment. We can work with just college admissions and selection. We can work with just financial aid. We can also work with just applications and essays. So all of those separate programs are also available. I think I'm going to leave it there and open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Amy. I appreciate that. Heartland, we've been partnered with you all for, I believe, 10 years, maybe 9 or 8, 9, 10 years. And you guys have been a fabulous resource to our organization. So if anyone's interested in learning more about that college planning program, just reach out to the person who invited you. They'll be happy to get you more information. But I do want to open it up for any questions. Feel free to put them into the chat. I do have a couple closing thoughts. So just hang on with us for a few more moments before we end the webinar. But so much information that we learned from Patrick. And even Amy, you know, I was shocked when you talked about these colleges are now, you know, probably going to get rid of an English degree because they can't get jobs. And that's the reality. That's why we do these workshops, because while we want to save money for our kids to go to school and help pay for those costs, sometimes college isn't even the right trajectory. But if it is, let's make sure we do it right and get into the right school and pre-plan as much as possible and think about what will their future opportunities be with this, you know, big expensive piece of paper that's going to be on the wall. So yeah, I was totally surprised by that being a new thing that these universities are doing. So any questions anyone has? I'm just going to share my screen real quickly for some final thoughts. Oops, 1 second. I hope this was so super informative for you all. So real quickly, I just wanted to just share, what do we do? So as you know, certified financial educators, our team is comprised of amazing financial professionals who can help you with every single thing that we talked about tonight. With our approach, we use a 7 money milestone approach, which is basically our way of helping guiding individuals to, you know, have some financial security and independence. You know, we meet with folks all the time. They want to do better with their money. They want to save. They want to, you know, maybe the goal is paying for college. They just don't know how. They don't know the exact steps. Like even on Patrick's part, he was talking about all these different accounts and investments. That's great and all, but how do you use it? How do you put those things in place? We use the 7 money milestone process where we look at everyone's financial situation holistically. We don't look at just investments or just the college aspect. We need to have a a whole picture of what's going on, so we can look out for the areas of opportunities and help bring any awareness to any gaps that you might have in your financial plan. So we're very proud of educating you first. First of all, reviewing everything, just looking at everything, educating you on your options, and then helping you take the next step to, take action, because that's super important. And that's what we kind of want to end this webinar on. We teach these workshops all the time, and especially, again, during April being Financial Literacy Awareness Month, it's easy to learn. But don't just take the great notes and say, oh, that was great information. You want to actually turn your knowledge into applied knowledge. Real knowledge is actually applied, where you actually take next steps. So if there was something you were thinking about and wanting to learn more about, again, review that with the person who invited you or any financial professional that you know and trust. But don't procrastinate. Set up the meeting today. It's not like you have to start right away. I mean, that's the goal. If you're serious, you probably would. And like Patrick mentioned, I love what he said. He said, if you're saving and you're working really hard towards a goal, it should feel like a little sacrifice. It should feel like, oh, I'm putting this money to this account, but you're doing it for a purpose and to reach a goal. So for your next steps, for all of our guests who joined us, we don't have an evaluation form. We normally do that in our classes at organizations. But again, schedule that personal review. Every person who invited you, they have a calendar where they can meet with you, whether it's in person or over Zoom. But most importantly, like Patrick mentioned, if you don't have a copy of our book, The How Money Works, Stop Being a Sucker, request a copy of it. We are happy to send it to you complimentary. CNBC, this book has been all over the place. CNBC, Fox, ABC, any letter TV show we've been on, we've had interviews, and CNBC did an amazing article about our book. We'd be happy to send those to you. And then lastly, I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Again, I don't see any other questions in the chat, but thank you all so much for joining us. We want to, again, we will continue to offer these workshops, whether it's on Zoom or if you live locally in Illinois, to our office. We'll be holding some in-office events coming up as well. So stay in touch with us so that you can be the first to know about these upcoming events. So that's all we have to share. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight.